Hi everyone, my name's Yolanda and I'm a professional services manager here at Formatize. And I just wanted to welcome you to today's Lunch and Learn webinar, where we're going to be covering our add-on feature for workflows. So today we're going to look at some of the key capabilities with the workflows module, and then also how to set up this module directly within your Formatize account. So during the session, if you do have any questions, please just use the Q&A function within the meeting, and we'll answer those as we go along. But we'll also have an opportunity for any other questions at the end of the session as well. Following the webinar, if you would like any further support with setting up your own workflow process within your account, we have a dedicated professional services team who would be more than happy to assist you with this process. So you can get in touch with us and then we'll be able to discuss the next options with you. Perfect. So as I mentioned, we're going to be going through our workflows module. So workflows can be used to manage any multi-stage process within your Formatize account. So that is tracking the progress of a submitted form through your process in the workflows module. And there's various processes that you can use this module to manage within your account. Some examples of that could be a leave request from your internal employees, so they can submit their form and then you can manage the relevant approvals for those requests. It can also be used for complaints handling. So if you have an external web form that's potentially completed by your customers, then that can come into a workflow and then you can manage the relevant follow-up process for that as well. An example that we're going to look at today is also for your health and safety processes, specifically managing your incident reports and tracking the investigation process and any corrective actions that can potentially come alongside that. So there's lots of great features and benefits that can be brought to your account through that workflows module, including some of the automated follow-up features that are included with that, as well as the various options that can be customized within that function. So I'll delve into that a little bit deeper today as we go through an example now. So I'm just going to jump into a Formatize account so that we can look at an example workflow module that's all set up and ready to go. Perfect. So when you log into your Formatize account and you come into your dashboard here, once you have workflows activated in your account, you'll be able to see a quick link to this module in the top toolbar of your web portal. So clicking this module here will bring up a drop-down list that includes an option to see a full list of all of the different workflows that you have set up within your account, as well as the quick links to various workflows that you can have set up there as well. You can also create a brand new workflow from this list using the customize option, and we'll go through that later on in today's session, just explaining those various steps and logic that's included with that process there. So the example that we're going to look at today is our incident register, which is an example that can be used to manage your incident reporting. So jumping into our workflow module itself, you can see that the workflow is made up of custom stages along the top here. So these are all fully customizable to the process that you are setting up and tracking within this module. And so they can be named as needed, and you can include as many stages as required for your process specifically. As part of these stages, you can also set up notifications. So these notifications can be automated to notify a specific user or team that need to action a particular form that has moved into that stage of your process. So for example, in our incident register example, we have set up a stage for when a new incident report has been submitted by a user. And then there is also a stage to manage when the investigation has been complete, and that could be by a different team member, such as the health and safety officer. Then we also have a stage for when the corrective actions have been implemented by the business where required. And then lastly, there's a closed off stage where the completed incident report will reside in. So here, if we have a particular notification that we want to go to a team member that's going to investigate and review the incident report that has been submitted, we can set that up against our initial stage in the process, but then we can also have a different notification going to a different team member as part of our corrective actions stage, just to let them know that there is a new form to action, and just to help you with automating that process as well. Perfect. So now that we have seen the different stages that we can set up here, the next step is that we just want to complete an example form so that we can see how that interacts with our workflow and moves through those different steps of the process. So here I'm going to complete an example incident report that is linked to that particular workflow. So it's just like any form template where you can complete all of the details in the relevant fields. Here we have the incident report information as well as some cause details that would help for the investigation process that we're completing. So from a usability point of view, you can include labels or visibility events to make specific sections only visible to the users where required. Here we have included a label to tell the user who's completing the initial incident report that this is where they can stop, and the next section will be completed by the health and safety officer who's responsible for that submission. So at this stage, the user would submit the report, and then this is going to enter into our workflow module at the new incident reported stage. So that's the first stage of the module that we have set up there. So jumping back into the workflow, I'm just going to refresh my screen so that it'll bring in any new information for us, including that report that has now been submitted and slotted nicely into that stage. So if we did have a notification set up for this stage of our process, that would now have been sent to the relevant user, telling them that a new report has been submitted and it's ready to action. So as part of the different stages in your workflow, you can include specific information from the report that can be used as a quick reference. So what I mean there is that you can set up custom columns as we have here. So we've included the date of the incident that was reported, what type of incident it is, who reported that information, and then a short description of the actual incident that has been reported itself. So the workflow is pulling all of this information from this particular form, and it's allowing you to refer to that quickly so you can easily identify what this form relates to when you're managing different reports that are coming into these stages here. We also have a few columns of system generated information that's automatically included with your workflows as well. So the first column is a workflow ID. So this is a unique reference for this entry into your workflow. So it's just an additional identifier for that particular entry so that you can track it through the workflow that you have set up. We also have the submitted form ID. So this is automatically generated when that form is submitted by the user in the system. And you'll also find this ID elsewhere in the system when you're looking at, for example, your submitted forms as well. Here we can see when this entry was created in the workflow, and then this will give us the last date and time it was modified. So that can just help you keep up to date when changes have been made, so that you can see when the last modification was completed for that particular submitted form. So at this point of this example process, I want to now action this incident report. So that includes completing an investigation for this particular incident that has been notified. So to do that, we can open this submitted form directly from within the workflow. So we can select any of the fields here, and then that's going to take me directly into the submitted form information. So this is really useful when you have different groups or teams that will be looking at the details completed in a report. So we can see all of the information that has initially been completed by the user in the system. And then now at this stage, I can complete my investigation details. So again, we're just answering those questions like we would in any form template within the system, completing those questions so that the information's all kept together in one place, and we have a single report for reference there as well. Once the section for this particular user has been completed, you will see multiple choice questions that control whether or not the form will move into the next stage of the process. So for this particular report that we've set up, if this question here is answered as yes, then that means the form will now move into the investigation complete stage. You'll see that we do have some visibility events pulling off that initial question, which is asking me if I want to complete any corrective actions for this particular incident. So you do have the ability to skip stages within a workflow. So if in this example, I didn't have any corrective actions and I wanted the form to move straight from investigation complete to closed, then I can answer this question as no and then complete the relevant sign-off question. For now, I'm just going to complete the investigation complete question, answer that one as yes, and submit the form so that we can see it moving into the next stage of the process automatically. So it's really intuitive in terms of you can use existing questions, multiple choice questions that you have built into a form template. So it can flow freely with your process and give you the relevant information that you need as part of the reporting and formatized there. So now that this form is processing, I just want to jump back into my workflow. And we would then see that this form has moved out of the new incident reported stage and automatically into our investigation complete stage. Now there's two forms currently within this stage at the moment. So there would be two forms to action for the user who is managing this particular step of the process. At this point in time, I do want to move it to closed because as we mentioned, we don't have any corrective actions that particularly relate to this form. If we did, we could just answer this question as yes, and you'll see that that corrective action section becomes visible so we can complete the relevant information. But instead, I'm going to answer that one as no, complete the sign off, include any comments there, and then complete the form like I normally would. So submitting that is now going to close off this report and move it into the final stage of that process. So it's really flexible. It'll work with you in terms of different scenarios within a process and not keeping it rigid in terms of having to move through every single step in order to be completed. So you can set those conditions to allow for different scenarios of your particular process there as well. So as you see, as the users submit forms and more incidents are reported in this example, then we will see a list build up of all of those reports within each stage. So it'll keep an entry for each of those submissions that have been completed with all of the relevant details and keeping track of those dates there for you as well automatically. Now, as part of the notifications that you can create within the system, you can also set up follow-up notifications or overdue notifications. So if a particular report has been sitting in the stage for too long, so for example, this incident report here that's been submitted has been sitting in the investigation complete stage for too long, we can then set it up that an automatic notification is emailed to a particular user to notify them that that form needs actioning and that it's been pending within that stage. So you can control when that notification is sent, if it's 7 days after it enters that stage of the process, or even if it's 24 hours, you do have control over when and how those notifications are sent to the relevant people there within your process. Perfect. So now that we've seen a working workflow with all of those points of information and the form moving through those stages, we want to set up our own workflow. So we want to go through that process of adding in the steps and the logic behind that. So to get started, what we want to do is go to the workflows dropdown. And as I mentioned, we can select the customize option here. So selecting customize will open up a new workflow register where you can start entering the standard information for that brand new workflow that you're going to set up. So as you would have seen, we can set up different workflows for different processes, and they can relate to separate form templates within the system as well. So here the first step is to enter in a title for our workflow that we're going to create. And so in this example, I want to set up a leave request management process so that we can see any of those requests that are coming through from our internal team and then manage the approvals or in any cases denial for that request that has been sent through to us. So we want to give the workflow a title there. And then the next step is to add any custom columns of information. So this is where we can include any information that we want to display within each stage of our process. So as part of this information here, I want to include a column to show the employee name for the person who has submitted the leave request. And then I also want to see what type of leave they've requested as well. Then I also want to see their start date for the leave request and the end date, so that you can easily see when those requests are coming through, who's requesting around the same dates, and then you can schedule your work as required or just manage the scheduling with your employees there. So when you're adding in those columns of information, there are some default columns that are always included as part of your workflow. But for any additional ones, we do want to make sure we select the correct type of information that's displayed here. So anywhere that we have dates, like I have selected, you just want to make sure that you select the date type, just so that that information is displayed properly within the workflow itself. Then there are a few different settings that we can apply for the workflow. So by default, the workflow name will always appear in the drop-down menu when you select workflows in the web portal. So if you wanted to, you can unselect this so that it only appears in the full list of workflow options. Then we do want to unselect this repeated entry option here. That's only if you have a field that's within a repeatable field, such as a table or a repeatable that's linking into your workflow directly. Then for the form submission events, by default, all of your saved and submitted forms will enter into the workflow to be processed. But you can change this to only take submitted forms into the workflow itself if needed. Then we want to set up the actual stages that the form will move through. So for this process, it's quite straightforward, where we want to see any new requests that have been submitted by the team. And then we want to see where the request itself has been either approved or denied. So I'm just going to create those 3 different stages and remove any additional stages from the defaults that we saw there that are no longer required. So then now that's only showing the particular steps of my process that are relevant. Then lastly, as part of this first step here, we just want to select the form or forms that relate to this particular workflow, and we'll go through those different stages. So here, this is the leave request form that I'm using. In the scenario where you may have different forms that different teams are using that you want to combine into one workflow, that's where you could select multiple reports or form templates from this list provided. Once we've done that, then we just want to make sure that we're saving our changes so that that will create the workflow in the system for us and take us to the second step of the configuration. So at this stage, we want to make sure that our form template is configured properly and that we have the correct multiple choice fields to be able to move it through those different steps. So I'm going to leave this page here. Once I've done the first step, I want to go into my form template and check the settings, and then we will come back to these conditions to then apply it to our form once we have the correct logic set up and ready to go there. So at this stage, I'm going to select the forms drop down and then go into my form templates. And then I'm going to go into the form builder for my report that will be linked to this workflow. So here I'm using the leave request that we selected from that list of forms, and I'm going to go into the form builder itself. So you'll see here in this form template that we have the employee name field, as well as that type of leave that is being requested, and the start and finish dates for the leave that is being provided as part of this form. So those are the fields that we will be linking to those columns that we have created. But what we want to make sure is that we have a multiple choice field that's going to control what stage of the process the form moves into. So when we have our first step of a workflow, it can be unconditional where any form for that form template that is submitted, so regardless of the user who submits the form or any information that they're including, we can have it always populating into the new request stage of our process. And then from there, we need to make sure that we have multiple choice fields that are going to control if it slots into the leave approved or the leave denied stages as part of our example. So we can see here that there is a multiple choice field set up at the moment. And so it has the question populated as well as the two options available. And then the object name has also been updated to make it nice and easy to identify. So if I didn't have this field available as part of my form template, what I would need to do in the form builder is go into my toolbox and go to the multiple choice category. And then from here, I can select any of these options available. So the different types of multiple choice fields will just depend on the different information that you're using and how the user is going to be completing that field within your form template. In this example, we've used the button field because we wanted to have multiple choice items, so answers that they can select, where they could only select one of the options available, but we did want the color to show in our final PDF report. So you'll see here when the option leave approved is selected, that green coloring will come into the PDF and make it nice and easy to identify that, yes, that's all good to go. But if it was denied, there may be potentially some further actions required as part of that. So it can just be a visual indicator for you. So once we've added in that question, then we can update the title or question that the user is going to answer. So in this example, we've updated it to leave status based on the approval that has been given. And then the user has removed the additional answer that wasn't required. And then we've updated these two options here to read as below. So to change the multiple choice item, the existing items, we can double click this, and then it will present us with the option to update that information or that text that's available as part of the item. And then that will keep the same coloring, but just change the wording to what is required for our specific form template. So we can do that for both of them there. And then if we did have any additional items, we can type them in the provided text field below the items and select add, and then that'll automatically add it to your item list for the multiple choice field. So once we have the items that are required as part of that field, we do also want to update the default object name. So anytime you add a field to the form builder, it will automatically give it a unique object name. It will be a very generic name. As you can see here, it's just using the type of field that we have added, but it is ideal to update this to an object name that's relevant to the question that's being asked for that field. This can just help you when you are setting up actions for your form template and the conditions for the workflow, just making that field nice and easy to identify where either the question or the object name is visible in the list of fields that are available. So here I'm just going to type in leave status so that that's nice and self-explanatory in terms of what this field relates to. So at this stage, we have added in the multiple choice field that's going to control where the form slots into within our workflow process. So then we want to make sure that we deploy our changes. So anytime you're updating a form template within Formatize and you want to make sure that those changes go live, you need to deploy the form to ensure that a new version is created, and then that will be available to you elsewhere to start a new form or to add those conditions to as part of the workflow process. Perfect. So now that you've updated your form, we then want to jump back into our workflow so that we can do the second step of the configuration for that process. So here I'm going into my workflows drop-down field, and you can see that the new workflow for my leave requests has been added. So I'm going to go back into that workflow, and it will show us all of the standard information that we have created here, including those custom fields and the 3 different stages that we've added to the settings. So here we can select edit, and you want to select edit workflow. So this is going to take you back into the first step of the customization for your workflow settings. So you can review this information, nothing should have changed there. So we can just save this to then move on to our next step of the process. So within the workflow stage conditions, this is where we're going to set up the conditions that will control what stage the form moves into as part of that workflow. So on the right-hand side here, you can see it is giving us a list of stages that do not have any conditions set up for at the moment. So the aim is to add all of your statuses or stages along here, set up the conditions and make sure that they're configured to how you need the workflow to run, and then not have any stages on the right-hand side. So to move them onto the side and to set that up, what we want to do is add the conditions for each of those individual stages. So it automatically sets us up with the first stage of the process, which is our new request received. So in the first set of fields here, you have the status or stage that we're adding a condition for. And then there's a register ID drop-down field here, which we don't need to modify when we are setting up the workflow initially. So what this will do once we have saved these conditions for our workflow is it will add automatically a text field to the form template directly. That's going to link it to this workflow. So that's an automatic process that will happen in the background once we've saved these settings. And it just ensures that the system knows that the leave request form is linked to the leave request workflow. You will see this field within your form template. So once we add in these settings, a new field will be added. So you can leave this field visible within the form, but the user doesn't need to do anything with it. It will just automatically populate with the register ID. So with that being said, you can hide the field within the form builder. So just making it invisible, not deleting it, but just making it invisible and deploying that change within the form template. So then here we can add in the conditions. For our new request stage, we want any form of the leave request to move into this workflow. So we're not going to add any condition only for the first stage of the process, but we'll see how to add the conditions for any of the subsequent stages within that workflow. Then the fields are the custom columns that you have set up that will display the information from your form template. So here, when you select the drop-down field next to the column name, you can see it's showing me all of the different fields from the form template itself. So selecting a field will then populate the information that's inputted into that field, into that column to be displayed within your workflow stages. So here I'm just going to leave my description blank, but I do want to make sure that the employee name field is populated into the employee name column. So I'm just going to go through and do the same thing for each of these columns of information, making sure that it's got the correct field linked to it. For the date fields, you can see that we have the option to link a date and time field to it if we want to. In this scenario within our form, we only have a leave start date and a leave finish date. So you just need to populate those date fields if there isn't a relevant time field that links to this particular date. The system will just default that information and it will still provide you with the date information that is populated within the form. So once you're happy with the first stage of the process, then we can select Add Status. And that's going to populate the next stage information, including the stage or status name. And it will automatically use the selection that you have made for the column information. So each of these columns have to be the same for each stage of the process so that the system knows that the employee name is displayed the same throughout that workflow. So you don't need to modify any of this detail once you have added it to the next first stage. All that we do need to do here is add our condition that's going to move reports into this particular step of the process. So to do that, we want to select Add Condition. And then here, the first drop-down field will be all of the fields that are available within your form template. So what we're going to base this condition off is the leave status. So that's the question that we have within the report that allows the user to select whether or not the leave has been approved. So here we want to make sure that this question equals leave approved. So you can see there's a couple of different options there in terms of how you can structure the condition. So equals is nice and self-explanatory. It has to equal the information that you select from the options. Contains is where you may have a checkbox field where more than one answer can be selected and more than one answer could move that form into that stage of the process. So you can use contains and then select the 2 or 3 answers, for example, that will move the form. And then doesn't equal is just the opposite to equals. So as long as the field doesn't have that information included, then it will trigger that condition and move the form into that stage. So here we're just going to select equals and I'm going to use leave approved because we want all of the approved ones to move into this stage. And then to add our last stage of the process, we just want to add the condition to our leave denied using the same field, but this time it's equals leave denied instead of leave approved. So once we've set those up, you can see we have the 3 different steps of the process and there's no more stages to satisfy on the right-hand side here. So the system's saying, yes, you've added the conditions that you need to and it's ready to go. So at this stage, we can now save these changes. And then that is your workflow set up and ready to start receiving those form submissions. So now if you wanted to, we can add notifications, those automatic notifications to our workflow. You don't have to include notifications as part of your process. If you would prefer to just have your forms moving through each step. Otherwise, to include those notifications, what we want to do is select Edit and then select Edit Notifications. And you have the option as part of these settings to set up notifications for any of those stages as part of the process. So as we mentioned in our example, some of the stages may have different notifications based on the different teams or the information that is provided to move the form into that stage. So for example, for the leave denied stage, we may want to send a notification particularly to the user to let them know that it's been denied and provide any reasoning there. Otherwise, we can just set up a new request notification to tell the manager or supervisor who's going to be approving the leave that there is a new leave request to check and approve. So to set that up, I want to select the stage to add the notification to. Click Notification, and then you'll see that there's a couple of different event types that you can use there. The one that we're going to focus on for now is the email notification. And then for the email recipient, we can include either a user from the system, so it can base it off the user information that you already have loaded in Formatize. So you can select any of those names there. Otherwise, we can select manual, and then that'll allow you to type in any email address that you want to receive that notification. So this can be useful if you have a shared inbox that you may want that notification to go to that's not particularly linked to a user within Formatize. So you can type in that email address here, and then they will receive the information that you input into this email notification that is sent. As you can see, you also have the option to email the notification to an email address that's inputted into a field within the form. So for example, if we had an employee email or manager email field within the report, we can include that object name as in this field here, but within the curly brackets. So just how this note tells you to set it up is how you can structure that information to use the email address that's populated in the form. So that can be useful in those scenarios where it may be a different manager who's approving different leave requests based on the employee that is submitting that information. So that will allow for the flexibility to notify those different people where required. In this example, I'm just going to leave that email address typed in there. And we do also want to attach a copy of the leave request form. So to do that, you select the PDF. If we had more than one form template included in this workflow, then it will show you the other form name in a list here. But for this particular workflow that we're setting up, there's only one form template involved. So we select that form name, click Add PDF, and then we can give the PDF a generic file name. So in this case, I'm just going to name it exactly the same as the form name that we have here. So that will attach a copy of the information on the PDF from the form that's submitted. And then here we can include a message for the person that's going to receive the notification. So that can be a generic message. In this case, it's going to be new leave request received. Make sure we spell everything correctly. And so this will be included in the email content for that notification. And here we can manage when the notification is sent. So in this scenario, based on the message that I've included here, I only want this notification to be sent when the form moves into that stage. So because this is the first stage of the process, after the form has been submitted, it'll be on that first submission, this notification will be sent once it enters the workflow. For any alternate notifications, so if we wanted to set up an overdue reminder, we can use the same content and settings that we've set up here and just add the additional settings that we have for the overdue reminders. So it can send the notification when it has been in that stage for too long. So in this example, if it hasn't moved out of the new request stage after 3 days, on the 3-day mark, you'll receive a notification. So you can trigger that and you can customize this to go on hours or years, just depending on the urgency of the requests that you're processing through the workflow. But then we can also add intervals where it will continue to notify you that the item is sitting within that stage so that you will move it out of that stage of the process. So it can really bug you to make sure that you're processing the forms as you need to and staying on top of that, those requests in this example that are coming through. So again, you have the same settings where we can set up how frequently the notification is sent, and you can even repeat it until that form has moved out of that stage. So while a form is in the stage, that's when these notifications are going to be sent. As soon as the form's updated and it moves into the next stage of the process, whether that's leave approved or leave denied, that's when these notifications for this stage of the process will stop for that form in particular. So as I mentioned, you can set up more than one notification for that particular stage. So if we had another email notification that we wanted to send with different content, and maybe this one was only sent when it was overdue, then you can add in the same settings, so including the recipient, a copy of the PDF if required, and then customizing that message. Then you can select these settings down the bottom here. So you can select it just to go if it's overdue and keep it repeating. So it'll send a notification every day until the form moves out of that stage for you. Perfect. So you can set up those notifications and just making sure that you're saving the changes as you go. And then that'll include the information for that particular stage of your process. And then you can repeat those steps for the other stages as needed there as well. Wonderful. So once you have set up your notifications and we have our stages and the forms linked with those conditions, then you're ready to go. So at this point of the process, you can then test your workflow to make sure that based on what you've set up in your settings, you're seeing the correct actions. So the form's moving into the correct stages and you're getting the correct notifications. So you can test that process and then release it to your team to start using. Perfect. So as I mentioned at the start of today's session, this workflows module is one of our add-on features. So for our standard user customers, that is $19.99 per month to have this module activated in your account. And then for our enterprise customers, you can get in touch with us and we can discuss pricing with you directly. Now, as this can be a little bit of a complex module to set up initially, there are a few different steps involved and some logic around applying what happens in your form to a staged workflow. We do have the professional services team that can help you along this process and provide you with the relevant support. So that can be virtual training with them, or we can even set up the workflows for you in your account based on discussions and your requirements. So again, you can get in touch with us to inquire about that, and we can talk to you about the different options available there. Now, if you have any questions at the moment, I'm going to be available to answer any of those for you. I'll stay on the call for a little bit longer and we can answer those just to make sure that you get the most out of today's session. For our smart routing giveaway, the winner will be announced after this session, so we will get in contact with them directly, so you'll know if you're the lucky winner of that little giveaway that we're doing at the moment. But for now, if you are a new customer with us, you can scan the QR code on my screen, and that can book you in with a demo with our welcome team, who can take you through this module as well as our other great features available in Formatize. If you're already with us and you want to get started with workflows, then you can use the QR code in the middle to activate this in your account, and you can get in touch with us to get started with that if you want any additional support. Otherwise, if you would like to start a free trial account with us as well, you can go to our website and get that set up and going. So with the workflows, you can set up pretty much any multi-stage process that you have. So that can include jobs or quotes that you're using a particular form for. So if you have a service report that has additional steps that you want to make sure are captured, if it's follow-up tasks or additional admin work that's included as part of that, you can set that up in a workflow to manage. So it can just help you show, it can help you segregate what forms are up to the different steps in that process and manage those follow-up reminders. And that can also be used for any quote form templates or proposals where you have that approval or agreement process included in there as well. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. And again, I'm here if you have any questions. For anyone that's still here, there will be a recording from today's session emailed to everyone who registered for the webinar. So you'll get to go back and, especially for some of those steps with setting up your own workflow, you'll be able to refer to that in future as well. Just had the question if there is a limit to the amount of forms that you can include in one workflow. So there technically isn't a limit to the amount of form templates that you can have feeding into a workflow. Ideally, to keep it streamlined and from a future-proofing point of view, you want to limit the number of forms that you have feeding into one workflow where possible. Understandably, there may be scenarios where you have a few different ones that are within the same process, but just keeping in mind that you will need to set up those conditions for each stage of the process for each of the individual forms that you add to that workflow. There aren't any preset workflows available at the moment, but this is definitely something that our professional services team can discuss with you. This is just because the different workflows and I guess the flexibility of the module means that it can be used as part of any process that you can build within a form template. We do have pre-built forms available in our form bank. So within your web portal, if you go to forms and then form bank, you will see a wide range of forms that are available, and you can use those as a starting point to then build a workflow based on this. But again, that's definitely something that our team can discuss with you and help with the next steps there. For the example where we have a staged building inspection that's completed by a building inspector, this could be something that you can use the workflow to manage the various stages that are completed within the report. The final form template would just need to be managed within one form. So you'd have those different stage inspections that you're completing within different sections of the one report. which will mean that you're able to provide a complete report to your customer, but then you're also able to see what stage of those inspections the form is up to as well.